On Wednesday, Armenian weightlifter Andranik Karapetyan appeared to have dislocated his elbow while competing in the 77 kg competition. He was in second place when, as he hoisted the weights over his head, in a 195 kilogram clean and jerk, they carried his left arm backward gruesomely. Now, while this is rather an exception, it might happen. And in this video, I'm not going to talk about weightlifting injuries per se, but I want to talk about injury prevention, the mistakes that you're making, and it all comes from this powerful book from The Science and Practice of Strength Training from Vladimir Zatsiorsky, William Kramer, and Andrew Fry. I'm halfway through the book, and it's a powerful source that I'm going to use most definitely in my coaching practice. Now, one thing that they say right here is that, interestingly, risk of injury in resistance training is low. And historically, the general risk of injury for a well-coached strength training program has been estimated to be about 1 per 10,000 athlete exposures. And injury risks have been estimated in resistance training sports as ranging from 0.24 to 5.50 injuries per 1,000 hours of exposure, with the lower end representing bodybuilding and the higher end representing strongman programs. And with kettlebells, that's what we specialize on this channel, I think it's somewhere in between. And the biggest takeaway before we jump into everything, this is going to be a big video with a lot of the timestamps included, is that strength training has a very low risk of injury, especially when properly designed programs are implemented and supervised by qualified coaches. And if you're over 40 and you want to become strong, fit, and lean without going to the gym twice as fast, download my free ebook in the first link in the description. Good veteran Gregory von Lebe here. So these 15 critical mistakes that I'm about to talk about are from this book, and I have adapted them to a certain extent to fit my experience. I'm going to share my expertise and my feedback in working with people over 40 and 50, especially with kettlebells. And I think this video is going to help you to, first of all, make sure you spot those critical mistakes. And second of all, in the second part of the video, we're going to talk about how to avoid them. And one critical, I think the most overarching aspect of injury prevention will be shared at the end of this video, so stay tuned. So let's jump into these 15 critical mistakes. Mistake number 1 is poor management and maintenance of equipment. Now, I remember when I had these older kettlebells, actually the first line that I bought, they were fitness competition kettlebells, still solid, but they had a filled core, so they started rattling after you put them through the ringer. And some of these kettlebells had some protruding spikes in the handle. And when you were using that particular kettlebell, that handle was able to cut your fingers. And this is what they mean, that you have to first make sure that you are maintaining the equipment, and you have to manage it properly in a way of where do you store the heaviest weights and where are the lightest one, and are the heaviest weights easily accessible. Mistake number 2 is inadequate instruction or improperly taught exercises. So inadequate instruction has to do with the fact that you have learned the technique from somebody who's not specialized or just has, let's say, book knowledge and not street knowledge. And once you have been taught improperly and you finally talk to somebody who is good at what they do, you have to do a lot of reprogramming. Mistake number 3 is lack of qualified supervision oversight. So oversight means that you need to have somebody in the room with you who is coaching you properly, giving you solid cues, understands who you are, and gives you proper feedback. And this doesn't have to be always in a one-on-one setting. It can also be that you are just training in a group setting, and then you want to have at least one qualified person who can give you proper cues and feedback. Mistake number 4 is improper storage and handling of equipment and weights. Now, improper storage means that, like I mentioned earlier, that the heaviest kettlebells or the heaviest weights are not easily accessible, so there might be an issue. You don't know how to store them, and you don't know how to handle equipment and weights. And this goes beyond kettlebells. For example, if you are not careful with plates, it might drop on your foot. If you're not careful with racking a dumbbell, you might hurt yourself. And these are just small little aspects, because sometimes it doesn't happen in the weight room per se, but it happens when you're done, or it happens when you lose focus. Then the critical mistake number 5 is you train with unresolved or pre-existing injuries. That's one of the reasons why we have some form of screening, very basic screening. We want to see where clients are at, if there are pre-existing injuries. And if you know that they are there, you always have to make sure that you have to separate your body, your well-being, the benefits that you want to get through strength training from your ego, because it doesn't make sense to blast your shoulders with lots of jerks and lots of overhead movements if you know that you have been critically injured in the shoulder. Now, you might remedy this to a certain extent, but you still want to be careful. Mistake number 6 is use of ill-fitting or unsuitable equipment. If you use kettlebells that are subpar, suboptimal, that are not proper, if you use equipment that is faulty, that might lead to injury. Very basic and simple to understand. Then critical mistake number 7, inexperienced coaches and spotters or lack thereof. Now, spotters, especially when you have barbell exercises, for example, a bench press, and you need a spotter to help you when you work with free weights in general, and an inexperienced coach who doesn't really understand how to teach you the exercises. This goes a little bit back into point number 2 and 3. But one of the interesting points about being a proper spotter is, especially with barbells, if you have somebody who knows how to spot you, they know exactly how to support you, they know exactly that they're not going to rip the barbell off of your hands, and they're not going to leave you dying to a certain extent, right? And I remember when I was at an event and there was this big guy, and we had this one dude who was doing a very heavy bench press, and I was at the top making sure to assist him there at the top of the bar, and then somebody was on the left side and the other dude was on the right side. And so the guy wasn't able to finish, so we had to help him up. And the other guy, the big dude, he didn't pick up the barbell on the left side, so the barbell tilted and we had to be like, ugh. And that was almost one of the first moments where I realized, wow, you don't know how to spot somebody. Then we have mistake number 8, and that is poorly structured programs with excessive progression. And this can be summarized with 2 simple sentences. You want too much too soon, and you go too heavy for too long. You don't use proper periodization. You don't use proper loading principles, for example, some deloading, then a retaining load, then a stimulating load. And you don't know how to program a proper strategy to help you achieve your goals. And then we have mistake number 9, and that is insufficient adaptation time to high-intensity training after breaks or vacations. So let's just assume you had a break from an injury, or you were on a holiday, and now you want to go back into your high-intensity workouts that you've gotten used to before you had the break, and now you don't accommodate for them. And this sometimes happens with some of our clients when they come back from vacation and they think that they can go balls to the walls immediately as they did before, and then they recognize either during the training session where we say, hey, we have to use lighter weights, even though that doesn't happen that often, or when they train by themselves, they feel, wow, the next day their body is killing themselves. Then we have critical mistake number 10, incomplete recovery from prior training sessions or activities, and that's a big one. You won't believe me how many times we have clients come in and then we have a good session and all of a sudden we recognize we can't use the usual load, we need more rest, and there are just certain issues that popped up that didn't happen last week. And all of a sudden, the client tells me, well, I was on a hiking trip yesterday for 5 hours. Well, what do you expect? If you hike for 5 hours, your body is going to be in shambles the next day, and you decide to enroll for a session, it doesn't make sense. So make sure you have proper recovery. Then we have mistake number 11, and that is mismatched programs that fail to account for age progression. That's one of the reasons why we have specialized in the over 40, over 50, over 60 crowd. And now we realize now our average age is 50 plus. And what we have seen from training with these individuals, even when we use proper deloading techniques, proper retaining loads, and we don't choose a stimulating load many weeks or sometimes even months into the program, is that they experience some form of discomfort and sometimes even pain after the session that might be long lasting to a certain extent. And then we have to work through each individual issue step by step. And it doesn't have to be that in some cases it happens that it is one particular exercise that causes some issues, but sometimes it's just the body has been so rusty. You didn't train for the last 50 years, and now we start moving into some proper training principles, and then the body reacts negatively. And this is a hurdle and an uphill battle that we have to fight alongside the client, and then all of a sudden it gets better, and then we can really ramp things up. And this is something that happens with the over 50 crowd. So you have to be very careful to use proper loading and proper programs. Then we have mistake number 12, and that is slippery flooring or use of inappropriate footwear. Slippery flooring, this is a 100% chance of you injuring yourself with a heavy kettlebell or with two heavy kettlebells. And inappropriate footwear, I've talked about this on this channel a couple of times. Make sure you have no mediator or almost no mediator between your foot and the floor, so that the foot and the floor have contact, immediate contact, so that there is proper proprioception happening. Your body knows where it's at in time and space, and you can produce the most strength and the most force. And then we have critical mistake number 13, and that is distracting training environments. Now, for the last 5 years, I haven't trained in a public gym. And I have seen this development that the younger generation wants to film themselves and the older generation doesn't want that. So you have two factions that are battling each other to a certain extent, where you have tripods and cameras all over the place and other people who don't like that. Now, that's an issue in and all by itself. But the key here is you are getting distracted. If you stumble over tripods and you walk into cameras or walk into videos of other people. So making sure that you have a distraction-free setting is one of the reasons why kettlebell training makes so much sense, because you can train at home. And then we have critical mistake number 14, allowing sick athletes to train. Now, if you are sick, you should recognize this immediately. The training doesn't make sense. I was sick, I think, a couple of months ago, not that intensively, but I felt it to a certain extent. And then I couldn't really train. And then once I got back into training, I had to dial it back intensively to a very strong degree. And finally, we have critical mistake number 15, and that is you are participating in conditioning programs and you're not cleared for them. This means certain conditioning or certain workouts are meant for a certain level of fitness, and if you don't have it, this workout is not going to challenge you. It's unfortunately going to break you. Now that we've covered the mistakes, let's check out the keys to avoid them, and it's 12 in total. So key number 1 is you want to learn and master the correct execution of exercises in your program. And yes, I know many people have learned from watching videos. This is fine, but let me tell you, working with a trainer who knows his or her stuff is irreplaceable. Then key number 2 is you want to perform an age-appropriate warm-up and ensure exercises are pain-free during this phase. Again, that's one of the reasons why we do some screening, very on a basic level. And I've recognized as I get a little bit older, my warm-ups are a little bit longer, and my warm-ups take up to 20 minutes before a competition or before a very intense training PR that I'm trying to hit. Key number 3 is you want to avoid overtraining or excessive exercise volume. Do not overdose on this. So this means overtraining happens over a period of time. And excessive training volume is where you are really battering and hammering yourselves to an extent where you don't feel comfortable, maybe you don't sleep well, or you have other issues or headaches. Pay close attention to how your body reacts to training. Then we have key number 4. You want to progress gradually to heavier loads, especially if you're a beginner. Many people, again, want too much too soon. So take your time. These heavy loads are there. They're waiting for you, but you have to get accustomed to them. And sometimes we get feedback from people who say, I'm strong, I'm fit, I've done CrossFit or whatever. And so I think for me, it makes sense to purchase a 24 kg kettlebell. What do you think? And then sometimes these people are discouraged when I tell them, listen, a 12 kg is a must for you as well, because you want to learn the techniques. Take your time. You don't have to rush it. This whole thing is a marathon. Then we have key number 5. You want to prioritize mastering proper technique before increasing the load. So before you go heavier, make sure your technique is safe. This takes ages. Certain exercises like the snatch or the clean and jerk or the jerk take ages to learn. And of course you can use some heavier weight and challenge you, but make sure you have your technique down pat. Then we have critical mistake number 6, and that is you want to reassess your lifting technique whenever intensity increases. This is something that I do prior to a competition. I use lighter weights as well to make sure my technique is still on the spot. And what you can do is take some lifting technique warm-up sessions before you use your working weights. And that might be that maybe you have 4 rounds that you want to train a couple of exercises, and the first round is your extended warm-up and your extended technique phase. Then we have key number 7, and that is seek guidance from an experienced coach for specialized or complex movements. And now here, it is important for you to understand that certain exercises, certain techniques, certain training modalities, they cannot be taught by somebody who focuses on everything. That's a discussion that I had with a trainer who thinks that a trainer has to do everything just a little bit because you want to help your clients to get the best out of everything a little bit. And I am a big fan of specialization. And so specializing, especially in kettlebells, because you see so many people not understanding how the kettlebell work, specializing in that field makes sense. And then it makes sense to talk to somebody who has specialized in this. This is what we've also covered in key number 1. And then we have key number 8, and that is focused on balanced strength development to prevent muscle imbalances. Something that happens sometimes when people get into bodybuilding and they're clueless, or they don't have a strategy, they don't have a program, and then they do bicep curls all the time. And it's not just muscle imbalances, it's also when you think that you can jump from one exercise to the next without covering basic principles. For example, if you want to learn the jerk, make sure you know how to clean first. Make sure you understand the rack position. Make sure you understand the hand insertion. Make sure you understand the press and the push press first. And this goes in the same principle. Then we have key number 8, and that is incorporate full kinetic chain exercises to address both upper and lower body strength. And full kinetic chain exercises, it's a very complex term for exercises that target your full body. For example, a snatch or a clean and jerk, they target your full body. But it also makes sense to maybe focus on certain exercises that are rather geared towards the upper body, and then certain exercises that are geared towards the lower body. And the kettlebell is such a powerful tool that it covers almost everything in every instant and every exercise, but you can still gear towards a certain goal where you say, you know what, today I'm going to focus rather on upper body strength, and the next day it's going to be lower body strength, so you can do more volume. And then we have key number 10, and that is you want to stay aware of your surroundings while training with kettlebells. This is very important because it happened to me more than once that I had a couple of kettlebells dispersed on the floor, and I was training, and then I was taking a step back, and because I forgot that there was one kettlebell right behind me and it was a 20 kg, I've tripped over it and I almost injured myself. And then we have key number 11, and that is you want to ensure sufficient space and appropriate flooring for safely dumping weights during lifts. And so what that means is enough space is always make sure your surroundings are clear. And the second thing is we're using 2 centimeter thick flooring where I can dump the kettlebell, but not dump it in a sense like a barbell where I completely let it go, but I can drop it in a controlled manner without having to be scared that I hit or damage the floor. And when you challenge yourself with a max rep set or with a set that goes almost close to muscle failure, then you still want to be careful, because when you drop the bells, you can still drop them controlled, but you can drop them in a relaxed manner. And if you're always careful that you have to pay close attention because you don't want to damage the floor, then it might be that you hurt yourself exactly in that moment when you drop the weights. And then we have key number 12, and that is you want to use well-maintained and suitable equipment for your training needs. This includes a solid kettlebell. That's one of the reasons why we recommend the Pro Kettlebell. It's one of the best kettlebells ever since I've gotten my hands on it. I don't want to choose anything else. And all professionals that I know who touch the Pro Kettlebell, they say the same thing. And if you want one, you can get one in the link in the description and use code Lebe to get 10% off. And now we're going to jump into the most important aspect of injury prevention, and that is think about the load exceeds capacity model. This summarizes almost everything into one sentence. If you're choosing a load that exceeds your body's capacity, your chances of injury are going through the roof. And capacity means understanding technique, being strong enough, being rested enough, having mental clarity. And the load, that's not just the exercise, that is daily activities, that is stress at the workplace, family, life in general. And this is what you have to balance out. Injuries sometimes might happen to a very small extent, where you feel that you've pulled something, but it dissipates after a couple of days or weeks. But serious and critical injuries where you really hurt yourself long term, I think this can be avoided almost completely if you don't compete and if you're not a professional athlete, if you just pay proper attention to these guidelines that I've presented you in this video. Here's the next thing that you have to do. Clean and press that like and subscribe button. Share with a friend who's also interested in kettlebells. And if you made it this far, download my free ebook in the first link in the description called the Kettlebell Code. If you're over 40, 50, or 60, you don't have a lot of time, but you still want to take care of your fitness, this is where the kettlebell comes in. And I'm going to show you a shortcut to success with my ebook. So what are you waiting for? Download it right now, 100% free in the first link in the description or in the pinned comment.